Hello everybody! So today we're gonna have a look at how to fly the UH-1H Huey. She can be a tricky beast to tame, but today we're gonna do just that. Now if you take a look at the upper left hand side of the screen, you see an indication of where the control surfaces actually are. And we're gonna move the stick to the slightly left, slightly back position and trim it there, so if you release the stick, that's where it's gonna be centered. Now it depends on a little bit on how heavy the Huey is and where the center of mass is, but a position around about there will always give you a stable hover, so you only have to do minor corrections once you raise the collective. And that's what you see me doing right here. Just picked her up and I just have to do really small corrections in order to keep her in place. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put her down again and turn her into the wind. And that's the first thing we need to keep in mind. Yes, even for a helicopter, wind direction is important, because by moving forward through the air, we actually gain additional lift, called transitional lift. So our takeoff is not going to be that dissimilar from a fixed-wing aircraft. We're just going to increase the collective a little bit and immediately start going forward by pushing the stick forward, and just by gaining speed, we'll automatically also gain altitude. Did you see that? While I was moving past 20 knots, the vertical speed indicator immediately picked up. Okay, now that we're airborne, we're going to gain a little more altitude, level off, and then do a turn into the direction we actually want to go in. Now in flight, there are three things we want to manage. First of all, we want to manage our collective so that we're not exceeding the limits of the turbine, so that the exhaust gas temperature stays within the green limits. Then by using the rudder pedals, we adjust our anti-torque rotor, our tail rotor, in order to actually fly straight. Well, we never really fly straight, but to fly in the most efficient manner, and that's achieved by stepping on the ball so that it is centered. And then we're moving the stick, which is our cycling control, and trimming it so that we're actually staying level and on course. Now, none of those exist in a vacuum, and changing one will always affect the other two, so you're constantly juggling those three against each other. But eventually you'll have figured out stable flight, and with a given amount of collective at a given altitude, this will result in a certain speed. Now, if you want to change that speed, you of course have to change your collective and then adjust rudder and cyclic accordingly. And this will result in you again flying level and straight, hopefully, at a new given speed. Now, of course, you can not adjust the cycling in order to fly straight and level, and instead use the collective to climb or descend. And practicing to smoothly change altitude and change speed will take quite a bit of practice. Now take some time to practice it, but at some point you will have to get back to the airport. Now coming in for landing is where most people have trouble, since there are two effects actively working against you. The first one is the already mentioned transitional lift. It's all nice while you're flying forward, but as soon as you start to slow down below 20 knots, you suddenly lose this transitional lift and will need more power because you're going slower, which is, well, pretty counterintuitive. The second effect that ties into it is a vortex ring state. Now, when you're hovering and you're descending in the hover, you can get into the air that you disturbed yourself and lose all lift. So to recap, once you're almost stationary, the loss of transitional lift will cause you to suddenly descend, and once you're almost stationary and rapidly descending, the vortex ring state will pick you up and rob you of all your lift. All in all, a pretty bad situation, made worse when you're close to the ground. So what we want to do to avoid both those effects is landing almost like in a fixed-wing aircraft, where we maintain forward speed for as long as possible. So now we're going into the wind towards the airport, and the first thing I do is I pull the cyclic back to its original center and adjust the collective so that I'm still maintaining altitude. And this position will get me down to around 60 knots. being on a nice slow approach with 60 knots is already a lot better than zooming towards the airport at 120 knots. I've pulled back the cyclic to around where my hover point was, and now I'm decelerating below 40 knots. Now I don't want to decelerate too far, I want to keep it between 30 and 40 knots. Okay, now I've cleared the trees, now I'm actually going to the final phase. I'm actually descending, but I'm not descending faster than 500 feet per minute. I've also pulled the cyclic back just a little bit to bleed off a little speed, but I'm watching the speed indicator like a hawk, and there I'm going through 20. I'm dropping a little, so I have to increase collective to actually maintain my only 500 feet of descent, and there I am in the hover. So to recap, when you're decelerating through 20 knots, you will lose lift, so you gotta be prepared for that and increase collective as you do. So I recommend practicing this on the runway where you don't have to land in a specific spot and just get used to watching your vertical speed indicator and your speed indicator. So I really hope you found this helpful. Enjoy your flights. Till next time.